Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. This is episode 2 of Intermediate Photoshop. In this episode, we're going to talk about exposure blending. Well, what exactly is exposure blending? Well, usually it's done by taking two or more images, let's say in this case 2 images, and you take one that's exposed for the highlights. So you're really making sure that the highlights are exposed properly, and you're not really too worried about, let's say, the shadows. But then in another exposure of the same exact scene, preferably done on a tripod, you would take the same exact shot, but this time it's exposed for the shadows, and you're not really too worried about those highlights. And then what you would do is you take both of those images into Photoshop and you would blend them so you have a balanced exposure of highlights and shadows. And there's a lot of different ways you could do this. You could just do it with a simple selection. You could do it by just getting layer mask and painting on it with a brush. And the way I'm going to show you is a common method that's done to get a blended exposure using channels. And it's really easy to do. And we're starting out in Lightroom because I know many of you do. So I want to show you how you would bring the images over into Lightroom. We're going to do a couple different examples. The first one is just this cityscape, and I have this version of the image. It's just exposed properly for the buildings. It's actually a pretty balanced exposure, but the sky's a little bright. I kind of like the sky in this darker image better than that one. So we're going to blend the sky on this version of the image with the sky on this image. So what you would do is you would, if you're a Lightroom user, go into Lightroom and just process them like you normally would with one little bit of a caveat. For this one that I am going to basically be keeping most of the buildings, I exposed it for the, or I processed it for the buildings, and I didn't really worry about the sky. Then on this one, this is a little more obvious, I processed it for the sky, made sure the sky looked like I wanted it to look, and I didn't really care about the buildings. As you could see, that quite underexposed. So what we're going to do is we're going to take them both into Photoshop, and to do that, just select them both on your film strip, click on one, hold your Control or Command key, and Control if you have a PC, Command if you have a Mac, and click on the second one so they're both selected. Then just right click on either of them, go up to Edit In, then all the way at the bottom is Open as Layers in Photoshop. So we're going to do that, and that will open one on top of the other. Now, I did mention that it would be best when you do this that you use a tripod, because that makes sure your images are aligned to each other properly. Actually, in this case, I did not use a tripod. So we're going to use Auto Align in Photoshop to align them. Now, I still recommend, even if you use a tripod, that you align them in Photoshop like we're going to do in a minute. That just ensures, even if your tripod just moved a tiny bit, that everything will get lined up properly. Otherwise, you get a lot of ghosting when you do this. Now, before we align them, for the way I like to do it using channels, I like to have the darker image on top in the layer stack. So right now, it's backwards. We have the lighter image on top of the darker image. So to arrange them properly, all you have to do is click on the one you want to move and just drag it. So we now have the darker image on top of the lighter image. Now, to align them, and again, do this even if you used a tripod, is click on one and then hold your Command or Control key in and click on the second one. Again, that's Control if you have PC, Command if you have a Mac. Go up to Edit, and then down to Auto Align Layers. We've done this in the Getting Started in Photoshop series. You may remember we did this. So we're just going to use the auto projection. That will work well, and it will align them at the pixel level. But what happens quite often when you do this, you'll get some blank pixels. If you look closely along the top and along the lower right, we have some, and lower left, we have some blank pixels. And those will just crop away. So I'm going to get the crop tool. It's right here. It's the C key on your keyboard is the keyboard shortcut for the crop tool. And I'm just going to really very quickly just crop away those blank pixels. And I'm not really too concerned about being perfect for this demonstration. All right, so we cropped away those blank pixels. Now we're going to use channels, I mentioned, to do our exposure blending. Now, to do that, we have them both layers selected. So just deselect one by just clicking on one or the other, and then you'll have them not both selected anymore. I want to deal with the top image, the top layer. So I'm going to click on that, and right here where it says layers, right next to it is channels. We're going to click there, and you can see we have an RGB, and then we have the red, green, and blue channels. Typically, you want to find the channel that has the most contrast, the most difference between the lighter part of the image and the darker part of the image. Usually, in my experience, that is blue, but not always, but usually will blue. So what you would do is you would just click on, let's say blue. Let's check that out. So the eyeball is turned on blue, the blue channel, but the green and the red are off. And you can see that the sky is very bright now and the rest of the image is very dark. Now let's just take a look, for the sake of thoroughness, green. And you can see green is not as high contrast as the blue was. And we'll go to red, and red isn't as high contrast either. So I think blue gives us our best contrast disparity, I guess, or the highest contrast, let's put it that way. So we have that. So we're going to be on this blue channel. So make sure that's active. Now what we want to do, this is the darker image, but this is the image that we want to keep the sky. So we really want to select the sky. And in this image, the sky is actually the brightest part of the image. And you could do you could get a selection tool and try to do a selection and things like that. But there's an easier way, and it only works when you're in channels. It won't work on the layers. What you need to do is simply hold in your Control or Command key. Again, it's Control if you have a PC, Command if you have a Mac. Hold that in, and then simply click right on this little postage stamp of the layer. And when I do that, you can see that we have a selection. Now it kind of selected the brightest part of the image. That's to be expected. So we're selecting really the brightest highlights when we click once. Now, if you just hold that Control or Command key in and click again, it will just do the same selection over and over. What you want to do is add to the selection. You want to try to bite in a little bit into the midtones a little bit. So you want to add some range of tones to our selection. Right now we just have the whitest whites in the image selected. So to add to this, hold the Shift key in while you hold in either that Control or Command key in. So in my case, because I have a Mac, I'm going to hold the Shift key in and hold my Command key in. So I'm holding those in together, and I'm again going to click on the postage stamp. And you can see now it's selected the entire sky, a little bit of the cement down here, and some of the roofs of the houses. So it increased our tonal range that is selected. Now you could do that several times. I never tested to see how many times you could do that. It will just keep selecting more and more, going into the midtones and even into the shadows a little bit. I think maybe 9 times I remember hearing once, but I never got that far, and I'm not going to bother doing it now. But let's say I want to do it one more time. So I'm going to hold the Shift and Command key, and again, if you have a PC, that's Shift and Control, and I'll click again. And you can see now it's starting to select some of the water down here at the bottom. I'm going to say this is a good selection. So I have this selection. Now I'm really done with channels. So we're just going to click on the RGB eyeball right here, so they're all turned back on. We're going to go over to our Layers tab here. So we're back in Layers. We're going to make sure we're clicked on this top layer. Okay, and I'm just going to turn the crop tool off because it's annoying me. So we're on this top layer. Now we're just simply going to add a layer mask to it. And you might remember from our Getting Started in Photoshop series, we've done this before. When you have a selection and you add a layer mask, whatever is selected stays. Whatever is not selected gets replaced by the layer below it. So we're just going to go down here to the bottom with this little layer mask icon, and we're just going to click. And you can see now we have a blended image. We have the sky from the first image selected. And then we have some of the roof, some of this cement over here, a little bit of the water is actually selected. And we have a mask here, a layer mask, that is allowing the buildings from the bottom layer to come through. And to just kind of demonstrate that, there is our brighter image. This was the image that was processed for the buildings. This was our darker image. Then we did our exposure blending using channels, and we came up with this. Now, quite often when you do this, your image will be not as, like, a little bit, not washed out, but it needs a little more contrast, in my opinion. And in this case, this one just seems a little flat to me. So when you're done with this, you may want to add an adjustment layer, and I would add a curves adjustment layer. And we just want to add a little contrast. So we're going to put an S curve on here. So I'm just going to go right here in the lower left-hand part of the curve and just pull that down a touch. Then I'm going to go up in the upper right-hand part, and I'm going to push that up a touch. And I think that just adds a little more contrast to the image, and it looks a little better. So there is our exposure blended image using channels. And I just, for the sake of thoroughness, I'd like to do this one more time. And I want to do it actually with this image that we actually used a couple different times in that Getting Started with Photoshop series. Again, this is a basilica that is near my house, and this is a little prayer room in that basilica. And I happened to be walking down the hallway and saw this room, and I took some pictures handheld of this room. And I exposed one for the room, and this one is exposed for the windows. And in Getting Started with Photoshop, I introduced layer masks by just painting on the mask to introduce these windows into this image. And then later on, when we were doing selections, I did the same thing. Well, you also could do this using exposure blending, and that's what we're going to do now. So I'm just going to select them both. Again, I'm just going to click on one, hold the Command key in, and click on the other. You could right-click on either image, or you could right-click up here on this image and just go to Edit In, and then all the way down at the bottom again is Open as Layers in Photoshop. Now that will bring those two images over to Photoshop. And while it's doing that, I just want to mention very quickly is that exposure blending isn't quite as popular. It isn't used as much anymore, mainly because the newer digital cameras have great exposure latitude. They just are really a wonder of technology. And in the early days of digital photography, it was quite often that you would crush the shadows if you exposed, for the sky. The shadows would be just so dark that you wouldn't be able to get any detail out of them. Or if you exposed for those shadows in an image, you would just blow out the highlights and you wouldn't be able to get any detail. But now, because the exposure latitude of the cameras are so good and effective, that you could go to a high dynamic ranged scene and really be able to capture everything in the raw file and be able to process it and tease out those details in the shadows and still not lose any of the detail in the highlights. There is an issue, though, when you do that a lot of times when you have those really high dynamic range scenes and you take an image like that. Typically you would expose for the highlights because it's a little easier still with digital cameras, no matter how good they are today. It's easier to blow out the highlights than it is to crush the shadows. Meaning you'll lose detail in the highlights before you lose any details in the shadows. So we'll expose for the highlights. In many cases that would be the sky, or in this case we'd expose for those windows. And then we'd open up the shadows and bring out the detail in the shadows. But typically when you have digital photography, the noise is in the shadows. The heavy, bad noise is in the shadows. So this is where exposure blending can help you, because you're really not introducing that noise. And a lot of people prefer this over HDR photography, which would help also. But HDR photography, especially if you're tone mapping the images, will introduce that, quote, HDR look, and a lot of us don't like that. And with a lot of HDR software, it introduces a lot of noise. And this is another way around that, where you're not going to get that noise. So we're going to do it to this image. Now I do have the darker image on top with the lighter image on the bottom. Now we have to align them, so I'm going to click on one, hold the Command key, and click on the other. Again, whenever I say Command, if you have a PC, you hit Control. We're going to go up to Edit, and we're going to go down to Auto Align Layers. We're going to use Auto Alignment, and we're going to click OK. Now it was handheld, so you can see it's off a little bit. So we're going to crop it real quick. Just bring down this corner and bring up this corner to get rid of all those dead pixels, and we'll click that checkbox up there. So now we're cropped. Now we're going to go to Channels again, and we're going to get our selection that way. So we're going to click over here on this tab, Channels, and we'll just double check for the sake of thoroughness which channel gives us the highest contrast. So this is the blue channel. That looks to be pretty contrasty to me. This is the green channel. That's probably equally good. And there's red. That's good. There's really not much difference here. We could probably use any of them. For the sake of this video, maybe we'll use the blue, or the green, I'm sorry. So we're going to use the green. So again, we want to get a selection here. Just hold the Command key in if you have a Mac, Control if you have a PC, click right on the postage stamp, and you can see we have a selection in the windows. Now, there's some bright parts down here on the ground, a little bit on the ceiling. Let's see if we could get that selected too, just to tone down that image that is properly exposed for the room. One of the queries I got from the Getting Started in Photoshop series, when I did that on this image, did those different ways to get these windows blended into that other image using layer mask and selections, one of the most people said is they thought the reflections on the bottom were a little too bright. So let's see if we could include some of that also. So I'm going to hold the Shift key in and the Command key and press on that, or click on that postage stamp again. We increased. I'm just going to do it a third time, fourth time, fifth time. You can see we're increasing more and more. Sixth time, seventh time, eighth time, ninth time. Let's see if it does 10. 10. Yeah, it did 10. So, all right, let's go with that. All right, so we have a selection of the highlights in the image. So we're going to turn all these back on. Just click on that RGB channel again. We're going to go over here to Layers. We're going to make sure that we're clicked on that top layer, and we're going to get a layer mask down here by clicking there. And there we have our blended image, our exposure blended image. And again, to recap, if we look at it, this bottom layer is the image as it was exposed for the room. Then the top layer was exposed for the windows, and then we did our exposure blending using channels, and we have the blended image. And if you wanted to add, if you felt it needed some more contrast, we could go to curves here, and again we could do a little S curve here, pull down there and push up there, maybe add a little contrast if you think it needs it, and that's our finished image. So that is how you would do exposure blending. And one thing I want to show you real quick here, if I can remember. This is our layer mask right here. Now, one interesting thing about the layer mask is you can see it's not purely black and white. It's got shades of gray. So it really does blend the image. It lets in parts of each image for each pixel. So it's actually blending them on the pixel level. So it does do a nice job in that regard to make sure that everything is properly blended and looks nice. So give that a try. In my experience, it doesn't work on every scene. A lot of times if you have trees, if you have a landscape image and trees are off into a blue sky, you'll get some haloing around the trees, and I obviously don't like that. So it might not work great for those situations. And in other situations, just plain old HDR and Lightroom might work fine. you know, so it's something, it's another like arrow in your quiver. So you know how to do this, and it might come in handy in some situations. So thank you, everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.